In this video, I'm going to show you how I ice a square cake with sharp edges in American buttercream. Hi, it's Karolyn. If you want to learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes, then I would love for you to join me by hitting subscribe and the bell. So I'm doing it this week. I'm making a square cake. And if you watch my channel, you know how much I do not like to do this. But I have told you the next time I make a square cake, I will film it so you can see my process of how I ice it and get sharp edges. So that's what we're going to review in this video. I am starting with my cake already baked and filled. So I made a 10-inch square cake and it's 3 layers. I prefer to make these bigger cakes 3 layers, not torted. And I have a video talking about torting cakes. I hate that I do this all the time. I don't know why I do, but I will link that in the description. But that way, when it's a 3-layer cake, it's a little higher and it looks more like a cube rather than a flat square. That doesn't make any sense, but you know what I'm talking about. It just looks better when these cakes are bigger, that they're a little higher. And real quick, before we get started, I just finished the voiceover and it was a little hard for me to explain in the video. I am cutting a board a little bit bigger than the cake is. So this way, that board is going to be used as a guide to help me get really straight lines and sharp edges around the cake. Everything that I use or any videos that I reference will be linked in the description for you. So let's get started. All right, I am starting with a 3-layer 10-inch cake. This is strawberry cake with cream cheese filling, and I have videos showing you how I make both of them. I will link that in the description. And I filled it and wrapped it in plastic wrap and let it settle for about an hour and a half before I started this process. Now I want to measure how big this cake is, and it's about 9.5 by 9.5. Cakes do shrink a little bit after you bake them. I want this overhang of this square piece that I'm making to be about 3/8 of an inch bigger than the cake on either side. So I'm just measuring and I'm trying to put the 3/8 inch off to one side, and then I'm measuring 3/8 inch bigger on the other side. Do you see how that takes me to just before 10.5 inches? So I hope this makes sense. I want this square, it'll make sense as I go on, but I want this square to be 10 3/8 inch by 10 3/8 inch. Okay, so I have this piece of foam core board. This is a 1/4 inch thick foam core board. I have an edible marker. I'm lining up my ruler on the one edge, and then I'm marking 10 3/8, and I'm making 3 dots so I can connect them. And then turn it 90 degrees. Wait, was that 90 degrees? And then I'm doing the same thing, marking those marks at the 10 3/8 notch. And then I have this carpet knife, and you can use an X-Acto knife as well. I'm lining up the ruler with the edge, and I'm connecting those 3 dots. And I just want to hold that ruler straight. You don't want the ruler to move. It's so annoying when it moves. And I'm just cutting this square out. So again, lining it up at the top and connecting those dots and cutting this square out. Just be careful because this blade is very sharp and you do not want to cut your little fingers off. Okay, now I have this Glade press and seal, and I'm going to pull out 2 really long strips of that where it overlaps in the middle. Fold that one side back, and I'm really going to press it down onto that square so it overlaps, and then I'm going to flip it over and then fold in one side and the other. So I just want to wrap this in a food-safe plastic wrap. Now, I want this to be able to stick, so I have to cut these little corners off. You'll see why I do it, because I want the plastic to stick as I fold it down. If that other plastic was there, it wouldn't stick to that piece. I hope that makes sense. And I'm doing the same thing on the other side. So now this is completely covered in that food-safe plastic wrap. And there's our little square. Now I put it on top of the cake, and you could see how it's sticking out over the edges just a little bit like we measured. Now, I am putting this cake on another cake, so this is going to be an upper tier. This is why I did it this way. So when I filled this cake, I put it on that cardboard circle, and I put a piece of wax paper on there because I'm going to have to move this cake around because it's an upper tier. If this is going to be the bottom tier of your cake, you could just put it on a cake board and eliminate this step. But I'm getting some icing all on the bottom to cover the cake. And then I'm taking that board that I cut and putting that down onto the cake. And now this is the board I'm going to ice this on, but I'm not keeping it on there. So I'm putting this piece of non-slip pad underneath so it doesn't move around as I'm icing the cake. If you're just sticking this cake onto that bottom board, then you can take off that piece of non-slip pad. That's going to help me easily lift this cake off to put it on top of another cake when I'm ready to do so, okay? So I'm going to stick another piece of non-slip pad underneath, and now nothing's going to slide around as I'm doing this. So I'm removing the piece of plastic. Now it looks a little crooked and wonky, so I want to get this in the right position. I have gloves on my hands. Do you see how I'm looking at that white square that I cut out, and I'm just trying to make sure that the cake is evenly placed on top of it so there's an even border the whole way around. I have a big batch of American buttercream icing. I have a video showing you how I make that, and I will link that in the description. So now I am putting a crumb coat on here, and I'm only bringing the spatula down to the white board, not all the way down to the gold board. So the crumb coat is going to be a thin coat of icing, and I'm just pressing it really hard against the side of the cake so no air bubbles form behind it. And again, I'm resting the tip of that spatula on that white board that I cut out previously. And I just want to make sure that I'm covering the entire cake with a thin layer of icing. So when I cover the top half of this cake, do you see how I'm letting the icing stick over the top of the cake? That's going to help me level off the icing. You'll see what I mean once I start to do it. But I just want to make sure that the icing is sticking out over top of the cake, and then I'm going to fill in the top of the cake with a thin layer of buttercream as well. Now this is just a crumb coat. It's not going to look perfect, and that's okay. So now I have a hot pot of water and a bench scraper, and I'm going to dip that in there to get the metal hot, wipe it off with my paper towel so it's dry, and then I'm resting the bottom of that bench scraper on that white board, not on the gold one, because this is a crumb coat. I'm just trying to get a thin layer of icing on here. So again, I'm just wiping this excess icing, resting the bottom of that bench scraper on the white board that I cut out previously. And I wiped off a little too much, so I don't want any cake showing through this crumb coat. And anywhere that I accidentally take off too much, I'm just adding a little bit more icing on here. It's not going to look perfect. It's just a crumb coat. That is okay. And now I'm holding my spatula level, and I'm pushing the icing back to just level off this icing. Now, you want to make sure that you make it as straight as you can. You see when I get to the corner, I don't go all the way off of the edge. I will review this later in this video, but making the corners in these cakes is a little challenging. There's a whole process to it. So I'm just gently pushing back this icing to level off this cake and to finish this crumb coat. So that looks good. I'm going to stick that back in the fridge for about 4 hours so that icing can solidify. And I got it out of the refrigerator. Look, that icing is hard now, and I can put on this next coat. Now, when I put on this next coat, I'm bringing the tip of my spatula all the way down to that gold board. So I'm covering the white board now. So this is giving this thicker layer of buttercream icing. And that's the reason why we make this board. This board is going to serve as a guide to the thickness of the buttercream, and it's going to help us get these straight edges and sharp corners. So I'm just doing the same thing that I did with the crumb coat, and I am putting that buttercream along the bottom half of the cake. And after I do the bottom half, I will do the top half. Now, very important when you're making these square cakes is to get enough icing on those corners. The corners need to be built out so you can shave the icing down and get sharp edges. You will see what I mean as I continue this process. So now before I did the top half of the cake, I just decided to fill in the top of the cake, which sometimes I do that, you know, sometimes I fill in the top after I have all the icing on the sides. It doesn't matter. Either way is fine. And now again, so I am putting this icing on the top half of the cake, making sure that the icing is sticking out over the top of the cake so we can level it off and make a nice sharp edge. And pay attention to your corners as you do this. It's the trickiest part in these square cakes. Do you see how I kind of wrapped it around the side, right? And you just want to make sure that there is icing sticking up over the top of the cake enough. See how that one corner is drooped down? So I added a little more icing. It looks like we're adding a lot, but we're going to scrape a lot of it off in order to get these sharp edges and corners. Okay, now I'm going to keep dipping this in the hot water to heat up the metal, wipe it off with a paper towel. You're not going to see me do that every time, but I'm going to. Now, I don't wipe it all the way down to the edge. Do you see how I stopped before I got to the end? I am putting that bench scraper all the way down to that gold board now. Right? Before we rested it on the white board, now I'm resting the bottom part of that bench scraper on that gold board. So I'm using the white board that we cut as a guide, and it's helping me pull that icing in a straight line. Now, once I get to the other side, you see how I'm not stopping? I'm not going past the end. I'm stopping before I get to the edge. That's how you get these perfect corners on these cakes. And I'm pushing the bench scraper away from me so I can see the corners, right? So I'm starting in one corner and then I go to the other side, and it's not perfect. You see how the line is still a little wavy. You really have to work at it to get these corners straight. So I'm starting at one side and pushing it back, not going all the way to the end, and then starting at the very same corner and going down the other side. And do you see how I'm holding it at like a 45-degree angle and pushing it against the cake to try to get these corners? Now it's still, the corners are not perfect. We put a lot of icing on here, so I'm using that bench scraper to scrape it off. Now that bottom part, there was not enough icing there for me to get a sharp corner, so I had to add a little more. You see how I'm holding that against the cake and pressing it back to try to get these sharp corners. These square cakes, I'm telling you, it's a big pain in the butt. This is why I don't do it that much, because look at all it takes just to get one corner. I'm working on this one corner, back and forth, trying to get this perfect. So do you see how I'm starting on one side and going down the other? Now I have to pop these little bubbles and then I can flatten them out with my bench scraper. You see how I push back that corner and then it formed a little bump. So we have to get rid of that bump. Again, hold this straight and create a sharp edge there by pressing the icing back. Now I keep dipping my bench scraper in the hot water and wiping it off with a paper towel. You don't see me doing that every time because I didn't want this to be so long, but I'm just working that one corner, holding that on a 45-degree angle and pressing it back. I have that bench scraper rested on the gold board using that white board that I cut as a guide, and that's really helping me get those straight lines on either side. That's why I cut that board a little bigger than the cake so we had enough room for the icing, and then I can use that board as a guide to help keep this straight and perfect. Got another little hole there. Let's pop that and then wipe that warm blade on there to get rid of that hole. Now that's sticking out again on the side. So again, I'm just working the bench scraper back and forth, trying to get rid of the wave in the corners and get a sharp corner. And the flatter I hold it against the cake, the more it smooths out that buttercream. Now there are some lines in there. We will smooth them out in the process a little later in this video. And again, I didn't have enough icing in that corner, so I had to add a little more. And then I'm taking my warm bench scraper and wiping that down. See how I'm using that edge to get that sharp cut right there? It made that corner so much sharper, but you gotta work very slowly and take real good care of these corners. See how I'm trying to wipe away that excess icing very gently. All right, now we have to smooth it out so it looks nice and pretty and not all jagged like that. I have a Viva paper towel. One side has a pattern, the other side doesn't. I'm sticking the side that does not have the pattern on it, wrapping it around the corner. Now, I'm not rounding the corner. I'm just putting it on one side, pull it a little tight, and wrapping it on the other side, and I'm trying to keep these corners sharp. This Viva paper towel method only works with a crusting buttercream. If you are using Swiss meringue or a buttercream that does not crust, this will not work. So you're going to have to do a different smoothing process. Now I'm keeping that that paper towel, sorry, wrapped around the corner, and using my fondant smoother now to help smooth out that buttercream because there were a lot of imperfections in there. I'm not taking my smoother and rounding it around the corner because I don't want that corner to round. I want to keep it as sharp as I can. So again, sticking that down on one side, pulling that tight, and then wrapping it around, trying not to round that corner. And that looks good for now. I put a little too much icing sticking over the top of the cake, so I just removed a little bit of it. And now I need to press this back and I want to make a sharp, even edge. What you need to do is hold that spatula straight, right? So you see how it's curving up a little too much. So I have a little too much icing still. I want to make this level with that top of the cake. So I'm sitting eye level with the cake, holding that spatula straight and pressing it back to smooth out this icing. Now, when I get to the corners, I'm not putting the spatula all the way over the edge or else I would have messed it up, right? So I have to be very careful when you get to those corners, right? Let me remove the rest of this icing. There's a little too much. Now, I'm using the back half of my spatula lined up with that line that I previously made and pressing this back. Do you see as I got to the corner, I didn't go all the way over, right? So now I'm trying to work this corner. It's a little sticking up a little bit right there and I need to flatten it out. And there was a little bit sticking up there. So do you see how I'm just trying to straighten this line? Holding my spatula perfectly level. If you hold it on an angle, your cake is going to be on an angle. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to stick that in the fridge for about 10 minutes just so that icing can form a crust. And now I can use my butcher paper to smooth this out even further. And again, this will only work if you use a crusting buttercream like my American buttercream. If you're using Swiss meringue, you're going to have to do a completely different smoothing process for this. But again, I'm doing the same thing that I did with that paper towel. I'm going to one corner and then the other corner. So I'm not wrapping it around and I'm not rounding out that corner. I'm trying to keep it as sharp as I can. I'm putting that fondant smoother all the way down to that gold board, holding it very straight and trying to get these sides straight. Now I want to refine that top edge and I'm holding that spatula perfectly level and just really taking care of the corners. So you could see that there's a little bit of an imperfection that I'm just pressing back, and make sure you take care of the corners so they are nice and sharp. So I'm just really refining this, trying to make sure that this cube is perfectly straight and level. And then I'm just dipping my spatula in some hot water, getting some hot water on there and dropping that on the very top of the cake. And I'm just using that hot water to smooth this out. Then I take the spatula from the edges and push it in just to make sure that the top of the cake is perfectly smooth. And then one more time for good measure, I'm just refining the edges and the corners with the paper and the fondant smoother. And there is your square cake. So there you go. There is the lengthy, tiring process of icing a square cake with nice sharp edges in buttercream icing. Now I know that this was a quick video. I can probably, maybe I'll make I'll do a class or something on this to go into further detail, but you can get the gist of the entire process of really working those corners. That's like the most important part of this, because anyone can make a square cake with round corners, right? It's to try to really get those sharp edges that makes these square cakes look so much better. Now, I know it was a little weird with my non-slip pad and everything because I'm actually going to be putting that cake on another cake. So that's actually the third or the second to the last. The bottom, it's almost the bottom tier. I don't know why I could talk, but I have to put that cake on top of another cake. And by the time I make this video, I'm not going to have the finished cake to put over here. So I won't be able to do that in this video. So sorry about that. But that's why I use that piece of non-slip pad underneath the cake. Now, you can actually leave it there because it's not actually touching the cake if you want to keep that as the bottom tier on that gold board like I showed you in this video. But the reason that I did it like that, I didn't tape it down. You could duct tape it down or whatever, but I think that non-slip pad works really good. But like I was saying, the reason that I did that is I'm going to be lifting that cake off of that gold board and sticking it on top of another tier. So that non-slip pad underneath that helps the cake to not shift around when I was icing it, and it helps me to easily lift that cake up so I can transfer it onto another cake. Now, one thing I want to say about that Glad press and seal, it does, it's a food safe plastic, so it can touch the cake without any issue. However, I do let people know whenever I wrap a board in that plastic to not use a serrated knife when they are cutting the cake. I'm going to let them know that there is a piece of plastic covering that board underneath that cake, and just to be very careful when you are cutting it. I hope that made sense. So I think that's it. If you guys have any other questions about this, please let me know. But do you see why, and I don't want to complain, but you know, with any job, there are things that you love to do and things that drive you a little crazy. And square cakes and those stinking corners, they take forever. Like if I had to do that in a round cake, it would have taken less than half the time. So that's why I just prefer to stick to round cakes, because this process is a little time consuming. But if you have any questions or comments, leave them below. And just a reminder, I did just start my KakeAcademy membership program, and I'm going to link that in the description for you. There are 3 tiers to that. The Cake Pop tier is the basic tier where you can just support me with my content creation and get some free and discounted extras like recipes and PDFs that I release. But the 2 upper tiers, the cupcake tier and the dessert table tier, both give access to my exclusive Facebook group. It's a private group where we can share our cakes, get some pricing advice, get some advice on how to bake your cakes, any design advice that you need. And I'm also going to be going live in that Facebook group and going to be teaching classes. So I would love to have you as a member. And in order to be a member of that Facebook group, you do need to be a member of the cupcake or the dessert table tier. But again, all of that is going to be listed in the description, and I would love to have you aboard. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is pinned in the comments below. And also, these shirts are available too. Man, I'm really like selling myself right now. But these are listed down below as well. And please keep in touch on socials, and you can check out my website. Everything's listed in the description. And if you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake. Have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.